Hello everybody, Maven here, and are you struggling to get the maximum 13 challenger kills on expert quarter blades? Well, struggle no longer, my dearest blueberries, because today I'm going to share the single best build to use to destroy expert quarter blades. And as a Titan main, it hurts my soul to admit that the best quarter blades build is unfortunately on Warlock, and that's going to be with the Geomag Stabilizers. Now, if you've been on YouTube at all this week, I'm sure you've stumbled upon a Geomag build video, or 2 or 3 or 4 of them. I'm sure everybody's going off about how meta these are, and on this channel, typically 99.9% of the time, I try to make content that is unique. I try to stray away from topics that everybody else is talking about so I can, kind of try to stand out. But this is going to be one of those rare curveballs, so I apologize if this is old news. But I'm still going to go over my exact Geomag setup and my loadout and what I have personally found to be optimal, which may differ from others' builds. So hopefully you can still get some useful information out of this video. So let's get to it. Hope you enjoy. Shout out to our sponsor, Advanced GG, the #1 gaming supplement in the world. Use code MAVEN at checkout for 10% off. Link down below. Thank you. Now, just to quickly validate today's build, here's some of the end screens from a few quarter blades runs I did yesterday with this build, and I was able to do the most boss damage in every single run I did, and I did like a dozen runs. Here's my personal favorite. I was able to do over 14 million boss damage in this one, and you know what's crazy about this? A majority of these blueberries I played with were also using the Geomag Stabilizers, and that just goes to show that you can't just slap on the Geomags and expect it to be good. You gotta min-max. This is proof that optimizing your build, your artifact, your loadout, and your playstyle can really go a long way. And I'm going to break down exactly what I'm doing to consistently top frag and expert quarter blades. So first of all, we all know what the Geomags do, but in case you don't, it does a lot of things. It buffs the heck out of your Chaos Reach super duration. It gives you free bolt charge stacks when you sprint while holding at least 6 stacks of bolt charge. And most importantly, Ionic Traces grant you a girthy amount of super energy, which is how we're able to spam supers like every 30 seconds, sometimes less. And just take a look at this clip here in the background gameplay, like literally at the very start of Quarter Blades, in this very first section alone, I come out of it with like 70% of my super charge. Like we nearly have our super and it's been what, like 15 seconds? Like the super spam is out of this world. And a big reason that the Geomags are such a powerhouse right now is because we got a new artifact mod, Limit Break. It buffs your super by 30% when you have an elemental buff matching it. And in this case, it will be amplified. Will pretty much always be amplified with this build. So Chaos Reach is absolutely melting faces, as you can probably tell by the gameplay. But the most important thing is that we gotta make Ionic Traces so we can spam these supers. But what weapon are we gonna use to make Ionic Traces? Is the Delicate Tomb? Is it the Cold Heart? Nope, it's actually gonna be the Warlord Spear Iron Banner Trace Rifle. The roll I got here is rewind rounds with jolting feedback, and this thing has been putting in the work in multiple different ways, and I'll tell you why. So jolting feedback is a perk that jolts targets periodically as you deal damage, and no, it does not have to be on a single target. It's like a progress system, so even if you move from target to target, you will jolt something guaranteed. And the reason trace rifles are so meta right now in Act 2 is because of the Harsh Refraction artifact mod, which buffs traces against combatants affected by an elemental debuff. The buff varies depending on the trace. Microcosm gets a 20% buff, all other exotic traces get a 35% buff, and all legendary traces get a whopping 50% damage buff. And the fact that jolting feedback on the Warlord Spear can apply that elemental debuff by itself, it'll very consistently do good damage. But not only that, it's also capable of proccing Spark of Ions. This is defeating a jolted target creates an Ionic Trace, which feeds into super energy with the Geomags. And it'll do the same thing with our aspect Electrostatic Mind. This is defeating targets with arc abilities or defeating jolted or blinded targets will create an Ionic Trace. So that's already 2 traces in 1 kill from Ions and Electrostatic Mind alone. But then you add the fact that we got Overload Trace Rifles this act as well, which exhaust targets on hit, lowering their damage output, and that ties into the mod Photonic Flare. This is defeating an exhausted target will emit a blinding burst, and that'll happen on every kill, so circling back around to Electrostatic Mind that wants you to defeat a jolted or blinded target, and the Warlord Spear is spreading jolt and blind all over the place, so the synergy here is perfect, and we create boatloads of Ionic Traces, just feeding into that Geomag super energy, but even more so, with the enhanced version of the Elemental Siphon mod, which says that elemental pickups matching your super element, aka Ionic Traces, will grant you super energy, and that stacks on top of the Geomag ability, which does the same thing. So that's how I'm able to get my super stupidly fast in the gameplay. And not only that, but these Ionic Traces also give us a stack of Bolt Charge from Spark of Discharge, which says collecting an Ionic Trace grants a stack of Bolt Charge, but make that 2 stacks because Spark of Frequency adds an additional stack of Bolt Charge whenever any source gives us Bolt Charge. And Discharge can also make an Ionic Trace when you defeat targets with arc weapons. And I know it says here that it's only a chance, but that's actually not a chance. It's a progress system, but it's invisible. Your goal is to get that progress bar to 3 and it'll create an Ionic Trace for you. Minors count as 1 stack towards that, elites and majors count as 2, and anything beyond that counts as 3. So you fill up that invisible progress bar to 3 stacks and an Ionic Trace will spawn. And then you tack on the Dielectric Artifact mod that says defeating an arc debuff target grants a stack of Bolt Charge, and once again jolting feedback makes that very free to proc. So the Warlord Spear is just a Bolt Charge printer basically, and we don't even have Rolling Storm on it, which is the crazy thing. And our Bolt Charges get a 150% damage buff from Flashover, and we also become amplified when we gain max Bolt Charge, which doesn't really matter because Electrostatic Mine makes us amplified when we collect Ionic Trace, so it's safe to say that we'll always be amplified with this build, and that gives us a 15% damage resist and also makes enemies less accurate towards us. Now to discharge our Bolt Charge, our main method will be Arc Soul. Now yes, you can run the Ionic Sentry if you'd like, which most people are doing, but I personally feel that it's a little bit overhyped. Yes, it is good, especially since it stuns unstops, which Quarter Blades does have, but honestly you can just ignore the champs and go straight for the boss. But I went with Arc Soul because I think everyone forgot how amazing it is. The Arc Soul becomes sentient when amplified, aka it doubles the amount of shots in its burst from 3 to 6, and the fact that you can grant it to allies who step into your rift means that you're just adding extra DPS all around. And of course the Arc Buddy stays with you wherever you go, whereas the Ionic Sentry is stationary and doesn't have the best radius, but again, it all comes down to preference. So I think I've ranted enough about the Warlord Spear, but another reason why it's so good to use a Trace on a Geomag build right now is because of the Beam Medic Artifact mod that heals you on Rapid Trace Rifle Final Blows, and that's nice because we are on Arc, which is a subclass with very limited ways to stay alive. And still on the topic of traces, that brings us to our heavy weapon, the Microcosm. One of the main reasons why we really value the Warlord Spear is because it doesn't take up the exotic slot, which allows us to run the Microcosm, which is the DPS meta in Court of Blades. If you've hopped into Court of Blades at all yet, you've probably seen people using this thing. The Microcosm has a perk called Paracausal Beam, which boosts your damage against shielded enemies, and I don't know if you've noticed, but literally every boss in Court of Blades is shielded. But most importantly, the Microcosm has a weird interaction against subjugators, since they are just coded as always being shielded, and it does like 1 billion damage to them. I don't know the exact amount, but a quick Google search suggests that it's a 4.4 times damage buff. So it's as if you're shooting them with over 4 microcosms at once, and it absolutely schmelts them like their name is Carl. And the Microcosm also has perfect synergy with the Geomags, because with the Geomags being a super spam build, the Microcosm happens to have a perk called Paracausal Imbuement, which gives it a 20% damage buff for 20 seconds after your super ends. So if mounting a boss with your Omega overcharged Chaos Reach wasn't enough, then you proceed to blast them with the Microcosm that's getting a 20% damage buff from both its perk as well as another 20% from the Harsh Refraction artifact mod. So to sum up this video in a nutshell, bosses go bye-bye. Now let's break down the rest of our build. Taking a look at our mods, it's mainly geared towards supporting our Warlord Spear as much as we possibly can. So we got the double special finders on our helmet, as well as the infinite special setup of charged up on the chest, stacks on the boots, and special finisher on the class item. And our main job here is to spam special finishers whenever we get the chance, so we're gonna need armor charge, which we can get from orbs we make with Reaper and Arc Siphon, but our main method is the elemental charge mod on our boots that can give us armor charge when we collect an Ionic Trace. And that mod is kinda OP with traces and makes it super easy to fill up our armor charge and abuse those special finishers. But we're also using armor charge for Arc Surge, and we even got time dilation to support that for a 10% damage buff to our Warlord Spear. But I can see a world in which you run Kinetic Surge for your Microcosm, but it is up to you. So for the rest of our mods, we got Bolstering Detonation, Impact Induction, and Focusing Strike on our gloves, and Arc Reserves, and a Resist on the chest. And the final fragment not yet mentioned is Spark of Resistance, just to be 15% tankier when surrounded, but this mod isn't absolutely necessary. You can run Spark of Shock or Amplitude if you want to. For my stats, I opted for double hundreds in resilience and discipline, and split the rest into recovery and strength, and no intellect does not matter and will not change how fast we get our super. But one thing I will say is that our nades are kind of underwhelming and only really meant for unstops since they're flashbangs. But personally, I'm going to reiterate and remove some discipline and try to up my recovery because I definitely want to have my arc buddy up more often. And for my primary, I'm just using my Overflow Kinetic Tremors Buzzard, mainly just to break blights, but you can use really whatever the heck you want. I just suggest using a primary because using another special would hog ammo from your Warlord Spear, which is a weapon that you're trying to spam non-stop, so you definitely don't want to take away from that. And that about does it for the build. If you are a Warlock player, you gotta give this a try. Trust me, once you use this build, you won't want to go back to whatever else it was you were using because I guarantee you this is stronger. And not to gloat, but this is just a challenge from me to you. Here's a couple clips from a run I just did with some rando blueberries. With 6 minutes left on the timer, we already had 8 challengers defeated, and we ended up clearing all 13 challengers with 2:32 left on the clock. Again, with an uncoordinated team of blueberries from LFG. So just try to match those 2 achievements with any other Warlock build and see if you can keep up. I'm telling you, Geomag Microcosm is going to make it the easiest to blaze through expert quarter blades just like this. So as always, the dim loadout link will be down below in the description and also the pinned comment if you'd like to give it a try. And if you got anybody who are Warlock mains, please consider sharing this video with them because this is a build that every Warlock player needs to be using in this activity. So if you play with your friends later and your Warlock buddy isn't using this build, you gotta send them here. And one more quick thing before ending the video, here's a quick snippet of my artifact setup for those who wanted to know. And that is going to do it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to hit the like button because it really helps out a ton. And if you are new here, please consider subscribing. Would love to have you here for more Act 2 content on the way. And remember to check out our sponsor, Advanced GG. Use code MAVEN at checkout for 10% off your order. Link down below, and I will catch you in the next video. See you later.